The
Great.
thing that fascinated me about you guys is I started listening to Christian music, like rock, alternative, whatever you want to call it, in about 86. So my first thing was like, and I don't know if you know these bands or not, because I know you were a little bit before, but like One Bad Pig, um, a lot of punk rock and stuff like that, the Altar Boys,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Call. Uh, but yeah, I mean, basically, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Until about a month ago, I had no idea that you guys or After the Fire or any of those guys were doing new wave pop as far back as the 80s and the 70s. Um, and I got really fascinated by that. I started listening to the albums. I started like doing some research and such. And I was like, I do interviews with musicians and stuff. I'm gonna try to talk to these guys and see, get some background on what they did and how they went about doing it, and what it was like. You know, I mean, because that's way before, in my opinion, the Christian alternative rock was cool. It was still like a pioneering kind of thing. Um, but yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself. Act like, I don't know who you are, and give us a little background on yourself and what you're about.
Okay. Well, my name is Dale Dirksen. I have a very diverse background, including being a musician for a job for about 6 or 7 years of my life. That would have been about 1970, late 70s to mid 80s. Part of that included doing some solo recording and touring solo. Some of it included working with bands. The two bands I played the most with were Quickflight and Steve Taylor. Played with some bands, Steve Taylor's band, not for very long. Did a tour and a couple of other dates. Quickflight, I was part of from about 1980-ish till when the band stopped playing music, which would have been 1984. And but I knew I grew up with the guys in Quickflight, so we were friends as kids. Went our separate ways for a while in the very, very early 80s, late 70s, and then I kind of rejoined those guys in that band in, I think, 1981. So that was that. I left the music world actually thinking I would probably never play music again. Lots of interesting circumstances around that. And believe it or not, when I was touring, I was working and living at a camp that was on the edge of Vancouver, BC, Canada, a horse camp. So I was riding horses on the weekend, or when I was off the road and touring and playing, kind of not cowboy music on the road, which was an interesting contrast. But I just really fell in love with working with staff and kids, and so I ended up moving into that world out of the music industry. Thought I would do that the rest of my life. Did it for relatively short time, and then ended up in Oregon and as a worship pastor at a church there, which was a surprise to me. Almost all of these things are a surprise to me. I didn't really ever have goals and dreams that this is what I was going to be when I grow up. Still not sure what that is, but ended up in a church. And when I went to that church, they said, we would like you to transition our kind of more conservative 1950s style of music to a vineyard. And at the time, I didn't know what vineyard was. And I didn't know really a lot about even what worship pastors did. But they were pretty determined that I was going to be that. And so I was. And I did that for 7 years, and it was a wonderful experience. Out of there, I ended up teaching. So I taught at a college, and eventually most of my teaching investment was at a grad school, a seminary in Canada. And then I went out of that into more church ministry and found myself in the role of executive pastor, which is another bit of a surprise, but did 10 years at that, and that was also good. That ended a year ago. And since then, I've been teaching adjunct part-time. I have a coaching practice, so I work with leaders in executive coaching and other kinds of stuff. And I've been able to make, I think, 4 recording projects since Quickflight, and so I still get to do that. Surprise, surprise. A couple of the records I did were picked up by somebody in the States to distribute and ended up paying for my doctorate. So got to keep doing it. That's me in a nutshell. I'm married. I have 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren, 1 on the way.
All right. So when I saw the coaching, because I did a little research, I was thinking coaching, like you were coaching like at a school or something. So you're more of a like business type coach, like executive business coach.
Yeah. So executive coaching is focused more on higher level leaders. That's just simple as that. A lot of pastors really function as executives in their church. They're responsible
Right.
for how the organization runs. So I do work with some pastoral leaders and some regular leaders in the regular world. Coaching is there's a lot of misunderstanding if you think about sports and stuff. So coaching really is not about telling people what to do. It's actually about helping people find their own way. And I did my training at Royal Roads University in Victoria, Canada, which is one of the at the time was one of the best coach training programs in the world, and I love it.
Excellent. Okay. All right. We'll get to what you're doing now in a little bit. So am I to understand that you weren't originally with the band when they started?
Technically, no,
Okay.
but in high school, I played with most of the guys from Quickflight briefly in a band called Malachi.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
not Quickflight. Although, if you look at the first Quickflight record, so I wasn't on that record. I did some work with some of those tunes after the fact, but there's a guy standing with his back to the camera holding a briefcase. That happens to be my younger brother. And I actually have that briefcase around here somewhere. So I've been connected with the band a lot over the years, but no, it wasn't on that first record.
Okay. So you didn't play on Breakaway,
Nope.
the first one. Okay. All right.
No.
How did you get into the band? It sounds like you knew the guys. So let's start from when you got into it. Where were they career-wise when you got into it?
Right. So I was touring solo. I was working with an actor, and we were doing a lot of comedy, music, drama type of stuff. We did 200 dates in 8 months, pretty much the corners of North America. And that was getting tiring, and it was a lot of small stuff and a lot of churches, and that was good, but I just felt like I needed something else. So I was talking with Rick. So Rick DeGroot's part of Quickflight one day and said, I think I need to do something else. And he says, well, I think we need to reinvent Quickflight a bit and maybe add another keyboard player so we'd have more of a keyboard focus. And I said, I think that sounds like a thing that I'd like to do. And so, Rick and I knew each other really well. We'd played in other bands before, in addition to that one in high school. And so I left that solo touring thing or music drama thing and moved to Vancouver and joined Quickflight. And at the time, Quickflight was playing some, and I'd been around Quickflight a lot. I actually sold Quickflight records off the stage when I was touring with the actor guy, but Quickflight was kind of at a bit of a crossroad. They hadn't been able to really make a living as musicians at that point, partly because in Canada there's just not enough work for a Christian band.
Right.
So one of the things that was going to happen was Quickflight was going to start playing in clubs and dance clubs primarily, and that time was actually very, very controversial in the church to do that. We were nationally banned from any church work, and we'd done stuff in our churches up to that point, and we were kind of summarily booted out for the decision to play in nightclubs. But that's what we did. So we spent an entire summer practicing to learn how to be a bar band, which is funny because we were really Bible college boys and never really understood the club culture, the dance club culture, the bar culture. It was a completely foreign thing to us, really. But we did, and we ended up hooked up with a manager who at the time managed Hart and Nick Gilder. So why he took on us, I don't know. I guess he thought we had something to offer. We were not nearly, of course, Nick Gilder and Hart. You've probably heard of Hart anyway.
Yeah, I know Hart, definitely, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, and so we just played for a year. We played sometimes 12 weeks straight. We'd play 6 nights in a row, travel, play another 6 nights, and it's grueling and not particularly good, I don't think, for us spiritually, but especially being abandoned, by our churches. But it was really good for us learning how to play. So, and it really impacted stuff. Not a lot of writing out of that time ended up on the Decent Beat record, but Metro Alien, which is the one lead vocal I did on the Quickflight record, was composed in one of those bars that was kind of learn, pay your dues. We had unpleasant names for these places and these bars, but it was in Kitimat, BC. You can Google that. That's in the middle of nowhere, and that's where Metro Alien was written. So it was lots of things about that time that were good, lots of things that were bad, but it was very formative. And we played top 40. We'd never done that before, and really learned how to play. It's one of the things, as I've worked with a lot of other musicians, especially Christian musicians, a lot of times Christian musicians start writing and playing their own stuff when they're 14. Regular people play other people's stuff until they're really kind of mature enough. And so that's what happened to us during that time. So Quickflight went from being play a few gigs a year to being full-time professional musicians. And that's what happened when I joined the band.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were signed to a guy named Bob Brooks, who owned a company called Signature Productions, and he also owned Little Mountain Sound Studio, which was probably the top studio in Canada at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave us unlimited studio time, so it was epic. And I mean, just to give you a sense of this, Little Mountain is a mirror studio, so there's 2 identical studios side by side, and we were working in this one doing recording. And while we did the Decent Beat record, on the other side, Bryan Adams did a record, Nazareth, some Canadian bands like Rockin' Hide, Paolas, Motley Crue did the Dr. Feelgood record.
Oh, wow.
Those all happened in that studio while we were doing the Decent Beat record.
Okay.
And so we were really fortunate to have that opportunity. And then we ended up, we were looking, considering some stuff with Capitol Records, so that wouldn't have been Christian, and Star Song Records, which was Christian. We ended up leaning towards Star Song, and our stuff isn't overtly Christian, so it played well in lots of places.
Right.
So I mean, that's I guess hopefully that answers your question.
Right. So when you say that the Capitol stuff wouldn't have been Christian versus Star Song, was that for you guys, was that like a hard decision? Like, and what I mean by hard decision is, was it a line in the sand, or was it you just meant that you weren't going to be able to push the Christianity the same way you would on Star Song?
No, actually, probably neither of those. We never pushed. In fact, we got in trouble doing Christian gigs, especially in the US, because we just didn't push. We played music, and so I mean, we got accused of a lot of things because we didn't do the pushy stuff.
Right.
The difference between Capitol and Star Song wasn't at all religious. It was with Capitol, we would have been a very, very small fish in a really big pond.
Okay.
And I think we felt like, the chances of this even going anywhere are really slight. With Star Song, so a couple of the guys who were execs, probably owners of Star Song at the time, one of them was Daryl Harris. They came to Vancouver. They were based out of Texas at the time, and wined and we did a little concert, and I mean, it was just so personal and so it felt like they were investing in us, and that was way more the reason than anything else. Capitol, and we wouldn't have done anything different as far as music goes.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure.
Yeah, with a regular label, we would have just done what we do.
Okay. That's what I was trying to figure out, because the way you said it, it sounded like you were going to have to make like draw a line in the sand. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
No.
So, okay.
So remember, we just played a year of clubs where there was no religion
Right.
in the story, and none really even. So that wasn't an issue for us.
Okay. All right.
Other than personally, and each of the guys in the band have a different story as far as their own spirituality and how that journey goes. Mine's different than others, and so I mean, I can't tell other people's stories, but
Sure. So it sounds like you dealt with the same things that most of the bands deal with today. Still, you're walking that line. You're like, okay, I'm in the world, and I'm trying not to be of the world, or maybe you're not trying to be of the or in the world. You know what I'm saying? How difficult was that?
That's a really good question, and I think I would say playing clubs without a lot of support. If we would have had good support, I think from our church, it would have been a different story. But playing clubs without support, you just feel like you're isolated in an island. And we had no time to be part of faith community during that time, and it was not good for me personally, spiritually. And so that was difficult. It was hard to be judged. But so this is a funny thing that happened. One time we played a gig and somebody showed up. It was in a bar and somebody showed up and they really kind of were looking for something to criticize. And so they showed up and they wrote this long letter after, and the letter handwritten, I think 4 pages, and it was condemning what we did and using all kinds of the Bible to do it. And that was fine. Well, one of our guys, like some of our crew and some of our players even weren't believers, weren't followers of Jesus. So we were all reading it and then had to explain to them what the issues were because they didn't even understand them. But at one point, the person who was writing the letter accused us of absurd gyrations. So those are rock moves that you do, And
Yes.
some of the guys, and especially the not church guys, they were so excited about that because that's what they said about Elvis. Absurd gyrations. That was the exact words. And so they felt like this is our key to success. We're going to be able to this is good. Criticism is good. And so at that time, we didn't see the difficulties we were getting from the church necessarily as a problem. It was a problem later for me because I kind of re-entered church work, and then some of that stuff comes back. But at the time, we're kind of rough around the edges, formerly squeaky clean Bible college boys playing in bars, and we just who cares? Who cares if people criticize?
Right.
Not a particularly mature approach, but I don't think it bothered us enough that you heard in, I think, I assume the song "Living in the World" from the Decent Beat record. So it influenced enough that I think that that song was created out of those criticisms.
Okay.
And yeah, that's so there was enough influence, enough pain, but generally, we're kind of like, man, who cares?
So Christian, you're in the Christian market, you're on Star Song. Was there it sounds like there was a little bit of a conscious effort to be a certain thing? Like he wanted to add another keyboard. Obviously there was some type of aim, we want to get a little more new wave oriented, or radio new wave rock, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Did you guys concentrate on that, or was it, were you of that world? What were you listening to at that point?
Yeah. A lot of the answer to that is what we were playing. So in clubs, in dance clubs, we chose keyboard oriented covers. And not totally. I learned how to play bass in bars. I never played bass before, and we just had to do some things that were like some standards, Rolling Stones, Beatles, some stuff from the 50s even, that we kind of turned them into a little more techno of a feel. But so we played songs from bands like Ultravox, which you've heard of Ultravox?
Oh, I know who they are. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we did a couple of songs. One was Sleepwalk and the other was Stood Still. And of course, playing in remote locations in, say, in northern BC in Canada, nobody knows what that is. So, so we intentionally did that. Sometimes we actually got fired from places because we didn't play Bob Seger and whatever. But that was definitely intentional. I don't think we would have ever used the word new wave. Maybe with the Breakaway record we would have, but not after that. And I've heard people call us techno, maybe one of the first Christian techno things. Maybe that's a little bit more accurate. It was just the beginning of digital, so we were still using analog keyboards, and yeah, I don't know how else to say it other than that's kind of where we were going, and there were influences by some bands that weren't exactly that. Roxy Music, I think, was a big influencer.
Right.
Some of Peter Gabriel's stuff, maybe. Anyway. The intent was to move toward a musical style way more than to move toward a content style or lyrical style or anything like that.
Okay. Okay. So what was it like being on a label like Star Song back then and being a like playing? Because I mean, when I look back at CCM music, contemporary Christian music, most of it seemed like it was behind.
Yep.
But you guys, for the time, were like right on the money. And how was that? I mean, what was that like to actually be on the money and not trying to play catch up?
Yeah, I mean that's a compliment. Thank you for that. I think there are a few reasons. One is we're Canadian, and in Canada there just isn't a Christian music industry.
Right.
There wasn't at the time, and there really isn't much of one now. So the idea of being a Christian musician as opposed to a not Christian musician wasn't nearly as big a thing as it was in the US even then, and I think still is. So I remember once we played with a band from Sweden called Jerusalem.
Oh yeah.
And fun guys, long hair guys, really interesting guys. And because we were Canadian, they were Swedish. They asked questions like, so help us understand this idea of Christian music. What is that? Because isn't music just music? And don't you just play music and then you're done? And what's with this that it has to somehow be Christian? And I think we felt some of the same confusion. We're just playing music. And so I remember playing in, I won't say where it was in Southern California, where, we weren't Christian enough. And that was hard for us to get. We were just playing music, and, how do you do that in a Christian way? It wasn't very familiar to us as Canadians. Star Song never put any pressure on us to do that. In fact, they were very encouraging. They were using the term crossover at the time, and they wanted us to get on regular radio, and we did. Especially not so much in the U.S., but in Europe, we were on regular radio. When Europe, it wasn't Christian industry like in the U.S.
Right.
So I think that's a big part of it, is that we were not U.S. We didn't have that in our bones. And we played clubs for a year, and so we were used to playing regular music, and we had really good support from the record label. I didn't have connection with Daryl Harris from Star Song for years, but about 20 years ago we reconnected and are very close friends now. So and I know a little bit more about what's happening with Star Song then too, which was that's a story that they can tell. But they definitely weren't pushing us to do Christian-y stuff. The only place we got that was, so Petra was signed at the time. And one time we were hanging out with the guys from Petra for some reason. I think our label asked us to do that. And they were coaching us, not in the way I coach. This is in the telling way of coaching, that
Right.
we needed to put more of Jesus in our songs, because we weren't going to be successful unless we put more Jesus in. And we kind of would scratch our heads at that and say, I don't think that's a thing. But for them, it really was.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, or some people would say fortunately, it is a thing. Definitely here it is.
Yeah.
Just working, because I've worked in the background and in the front ground. And yeah, there's definitely a pressure to do a certain thing, or there was.
Yeah.
It's not so much anymore,
Yeah.
but there definitely was at that. I know what you're saying
Sure.
at that time.
I wouldn't, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Sure.
You write about what you write about. So I've done most of my recordings have been way more overtly Christian than the Quickflight stuff. I think it's a problem when it becomes an artistic compromise, so it really just becomes kitschy. You're really just trying to sell stuff,
Sure.
or it really isn't faithful to what I would say is the truth of the gospel. And
Right.
that's tickling people's ears, giving them what they want to hear. To me, that to say, well, you got to add this kind of content to your song so you can sell more. I think that's actually a pretty significant problem
Oh,
in
that's a big problem.
today, especially in stuff people call worship. And I mean, my doctorate is in theology of worship, so I don't use that word to talk about music.
Right. Right.
Another
Um,
another story.
so you guys, you were doing the clubs. You guys moved into doing, did you ever play churches? Did you kind
Um,
of graduate into that, or?
uh, so I'm just going to say not well. So Quickflight did play some churches before my time,
Okay.
but
Okay.
and some of the songs on the Breakaway record were way more overt and kind of Christianly in your face. Especially like a song like Atheist, I mean, that's really in your face from a Christian perspective.
Right.
And that went over well in some places. So Quickflight did some gigs with Servant, who I know some of the guys from Servant long since the band ended. Good friends with some of them, but that was that worked okay. I remember Quickflight played a gig at a kind of like a state fair, but it was in Canada, so it was an exhibition in Edmonton, Alberta, and they were just playing, in a booth, and it was for a church. But the idea was that you're going to get this edgy sounding stuff, and then you're going to attract people and probably save them by doing
Sure.
that.
Right.
So that happened. I remember one time we played a church. We played churches sometimes, but one time we played a church in when I was playing with the band, and one of our tech guys thought we need some atmosphere, and so we were playing bars then. And at that time in Canada, you could smoke in a bar, you can't anymore. So there was always this haze, and it was just a feel. And so here we are playing in a church, and just had no feel. And so one of our
Right.
tech guys said, "Well, we need some smoke," and so he did a flash pot of some type, and it was too much, and the place was just thick with smoke, and oh, it was horrible. I literally couldn't see across the stage, and we're doing our thing. Well, next thing you know, the elders from the church show up, and they confronted us and said, "What have you done here? You brought the devil into our church." And a lot of it was the smoke. And it was a Baptist church. They just didn't. And I think they were pretty convinced that we would swear at them, because that's what they felt. And we had a bit of a reputation because we played clubs, and so my response was, well, let's pray about this. Let's try to figure this out. And their jaws kind of fell on the floor, and they didn't know what to do at that point. They would have been more comfortable with me swearing at them. But that was a little bit more consistent with how we did churches. Like I say, not that well,
Right.
because churches really wanted a clear message.
So
And
where did you guys find yourself playing when the second record came out?
yeah, mostly festivals, universities, like rooms in universities, community halls, stuff like that. And they were typically promoted by Christian promoters. And that was always a little bit of tension, being wanted something else. But yeah, we played a ton of festivals, and that was
Who
pretty fun.
who would you play with that would like kind of be in your wheelhouse?
Um, well, I don't think anybody we played with. So there were a few bands that could have been kind of punk-ish. So I don't know if you remember the band Undercover.
Oh yes.
Played with them a few times. Great guys. I could tell a good story about that, but I won't. Of course, Steve Taylor. I played with Steve, but Quickflight toured with Steve, and Steve was not like us, but a little bit similar, right? A little bit of a feel of something, a little more focus on content,
Hmm.
or the Christian content than us. Um, and Res Band played with those guys a number of times. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
One of the great stories, which if you've seen any video of Quickflight on YouTube, there's only one concert that ever made it onto YouTube, and that was one in Los Angeles, and that was where we played with Kerry Lefgren at the end of the night, and he wasn't billed because of record deal issues, so he wasn't really public. But I grew up listening to Kansas. I mean, this is big deal to be able to play on the same show with a guy like him. And of
Right.
course they were rich, and each guy had his own roadie, and I mean, it was a totally different world from our world. But the crowd was there really to see bands like us. And by the time the good band was on, people left, and there was about 2,000 people left at the end of that. And I remember standing at the back of this football stadium watching people leave and thinking, this is the good band, that's playing. But it just wasn't on the radar for that crowd. They were looking for more stuff like what we were doing. But I can't think of anybody who was similar to us that we played with.
Okay. All right. Um, so what happened to end the band? Or did it really end? Did it just kind of peter out? Or, I mean, how did that kind of go?
No, it ended. Um, I'll tell my story of that. And I just want to be really careful. I had the privilege of working with, I think, one of the most brilliant writer producers there ever was, and that's Rick DeGroot, for sure, in Christian music. And Rick just really is a gifted guy. And so Rick and I parted ways at that point. And I mean, we have connected since, and we grew up together. I know his family really well. We still have that kind of stuff. But I'm not telling Rick's story here. I was working at this camp, right? And at one point I'd connected with our management. So that was Barry Samuels, our agent, which was Mike Cavelli, and the record label, which would have been Daryl and Wayne. And I said, I'd like to give my summer to this camp. Is it possible that we won't be touring this summer? And, can I do this? And there was a resounding, all of them said, yeah, no tours planned this summer. And I said, great. So I committed to this camp for the summer. And I think it was July 20th, guessing, I got a call, and the person said, we got a whole bunch of dates with you two in Europe, and pack your bags, we're in Amsterdam on Thursday. And that was really a crisis for me, because I just took that commitment to that camp pretty seriously. And so my response was, well, I can't do that. I've made a commitment to this camp, and I can't let them down. And that was basically the end of my music career. You can't do that. You need to be willing to drop everything and go, especially that was a big deal for us to do those gigs, those dates. Quickflight never played again after that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So a few reasons. I think, difference in spiritual direction that guys in the band had. Rick actually had an opportunity to play with another band that was quite a bit bigger than Quickflight. They did a tour with Tina Turner, and at the time was pretty big stuff. So that he went on to that, and that was good for him. Not
And what
so good.
year? So what year was the U2 thing?
That would have been in summer '84.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't even know what the deal was with that. That was just what I heard was, we have some dates with you too. Could have been festivals. I don't know what it was. Maybe they were opening for us. I don't know.
Right.
That was supposed to be funny.
Yeah,
But
well, yeah, I mean, what they were, that would have been the Unforgettable Fire, right?
they were
84?
they were huge. They were huge. I mean, we
Yeah.
played U2 stuff in clubs when they were not as huge, but no, they were they were big
So they
stuff.
were already big by then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I mean, perspective. I've told that story to people, and they say, "Wow, you really missed out on an amazing opportunity." And my response, well, I've never regretted that. My response was actually, I felt like I got to invest in something that was really important, and it was of eternal value, and that
Right.
was the relationship stuff and community that was a big deal. Now, just so you know, too, I am wired quite strongly as an introvert, and I was horrible on the road. Touring was terrible for me, and I had no idea at the time what were the reasons. I didn't know that I was an introvert. I just knew that I was falling apart, especially doing, probably the worst was doing those 200 dates, me and the actor. I mean, it just was insane, and I was wrecked. And so it wasn't really great for me to tour anyway.
Right.
Um, so it wasn't just me having a higher calling. That was part of it, or feeling a higher calling. It was a lot of different factors. Just so happens that I met my wife the day after the last concert we did is Quickflight, which is the one that's on YouTube. It never played after that.
Oh, that's the last one. Oh,
Yep.
wow. Okay.
And I was in, I think June maybe of that year, and I met my wife the next day at this camp, and she was working at the camp, and we
There
didn't.
you go, man.
I know, and we weren't involved romantically when I said no to the Europe stuff. That came later, but it was pretty important to me not to marry somebody who might have been enamored with somebody who's a rock star.
Sure. Right. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Well, I've got some fun questions. They're fun for me. I don't know if they'll be fun for you. Um, who who would you say is your go-to musician or band? Who do you like? If you were to pick one band that you just love, who would it be?
Uh, hmm, Almost impossible. I still love the Avalon record by Roxy Music.
Excellent. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that's long ago. But
Right.
I have to confess, I'm a James Taylor fan. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
not a band, but not really stylistically what I've ever played.
Right. Right. No, that's fine. That's fine. Um, if you have you, let me get my little list. I don't want to forget anything. Um, what would you say is somebody that you listen to now? Do you listen to any music now, like popular, I guess, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. Um,
Like, who's somebody that you can think of right now that you like right now?
this could be controversial for a guy who's been a pastor much of my life. I really like Billie Eilish. I think brilliant creative work. I love the simplicity of doing work in your house. I mean, I do that now too because I have time. Love that. Um, hmm. My son-in-law has a band called the Elephant Seal Song Company. Check that out.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
What would you consider that to be, like
Uh,
stylistically?
yeah, alternative, artistic, loud, 6-minute songs.
Oh,
I got
whoa, okay.
I got to sing on one of them.
Oh, cool. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right. Hey, what are they called?
The Elephant Seal Song Company.
Okay, all right.
Just Google that. Not too many of those out there.
Okay, all right. Um, do you have a favorite superhero?
Like Superman type superhero.
Yes.
um, Only because one of my grandson loves him. Maybe Captain America.
Cool. Okay. All right. All right. Um, if you had to choose one movie or television show that you could watch, what would it be?
It's a Christopher Walken movie that was terrifying and fascinating to me many, many years ago called Brainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go.
Okay.
I don't watch that kind of movies these days because my wife wouldn't enjoy them, but I'll go with that.
What about that fascinated you?
So, you know, well, the story is they invent a way to basically record brain waves and then play them back so you can put stuff on your head and experience someone else's thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they decide they want to experience what death feels like. And so they record and then they try to live it. And part of it, will that person die or not? So just fascinating. Christopher Walken has done some stuff, and I don't think I'm a particularly dark person, but I just found that I love science, and so I found that really interesting.
Okay. All right. Is there anything recent that piques your interest, science fiction wise? Because I'm a big sci-fi guy too.
Yeah, Ex Machina.
Okay.
My wife and I watched The 100 on Netflix for a
Mm-hmm.
while, but it just got too violent.
Okay. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Um, I I guess we're kind of going backwards with this one, but obviously you consider yourself to be a religious person or a Christian. Um, and that has affected your career choices, you would say, obviously.
Yep.
Okay. Does it affect the music that you do today?
Yes. So I did a series of songs, old songs for Lent this year,
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 of them, I think, and they were mostly hymns that I converted into a darker minor feel, um, and but they were hymns. So "Be Still My Soul," that's an old one. I did the actual tune that's associated with some hymn books for Jesus, Lover of My Soul. I did a minor dark version of It Is Well With My Soul. Probably musically not that well, but that fits with kind of where I'm at. So yeah, it definitely influences that. It doesn't have to for me. So I don't feel any pressure or need
Okay.
to write about faith. Um,
So
yeah.
when you say that it's a darker take on those hymns or on those older songs, is it the instruments you use or is it just the tone that you approach it? Like, is it keyboard oriented? Like, what sort of?
Yeah, you can hear it. I put them on SoundCloud. They're easy to get a hold of if you
Okay,
ever want to
cool. Okay,
listen.
great.
But so It Is Well With My Soul, you know, the more common, it is well with my soul, very kind of triumphant. It was, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. So a little bit more pentatonic, a little bit more um, well, minor,
Okay,
and those usually carry a bit more of a sense of not bright and cheery, not
okay,
happy. Yeah, and I didn't use a lot of. I mean, I use more typical instruments. Just so happens I use drums out of a machine, but they sound like drums.
okay.
And most of it is an actual bass guitar or an actual guitar. So it's not like Quickflight actually had almost none of that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
Um, so it's not really techno, but it is out of keyboards. And it's done by me in my basement. So
Okay, okay. So yeah, so you're not saying that it's like Peter Murphy or the Bauhaus or the Cure.
no.
It's not dark in that way. It's just like a little bit. It's less pithy.
Yeah, if somebody who loves and their favorite hymn is "It Is Well With My Soul," they might say the music of this version you've done does not communicate that as well with your soul.
Okay.
It
All right.
communicates that maybe you're a little sad.
Right. Maybe you're trying to talk yourself into it.
Yeah. Or what I would say is, my soul is well in dark times.
Very good. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, one last question. What would what kind of advice would you give people these days that are doing music, um, and trying to balance the religion with the music,
Yeah.
as somebody who experienced that and lived through it?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is know yourself, understand yourself. Self-awareness is it's really important in answering that question, because that will help you know what the next thing is, and that is to know what's expected of you. So that is true in everything. Get a job. It's important to know who you are and what the person expects of you in that job, whether it's in a church or you're a bricklayer or whatever. That's same with the music industry. And so if your ideal is to express yourself, which is an artistic value, and you're working with people or in contexts where it's not about self-expression, it's actually about either communicating a specific message or maybe focusing on God. If you're focusing on God, that's actually not about self-expression.
Sure.
I think understanding yourself and the expectations on you are really, really important, because if they don't match, you will be frustrated. And that's true in life, right? So you get a job and you think, this is what they're hiring me to do, and this is what I can do, and I'm good at this. And you find out partway in, they actually don't want you to do that. They want you to do something else.
Oh
And you
yeah.
don't even know if you're good at it, right? So to me, that's really important in the music world. So knowing yourself, like for me, learning that I'm an introvert, that's pretty important to know,
Right.
because otherwise you're gonna have trouble. Um, and and knowing what's expected of you, and if those line up, you will have a far better experience than if they don't.
Cool.
It doesn't mean they can't line, like you can actually still do stuff when they don't line up. We all do. We all work in places where, oh, they're expecting something different than what I thought or what I have to offer, but I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to be faithful to it. I'm still going to persevere with it. But it's so important to know, so you know what you're getting into. I think that's the big one. People need to obviously be good at what they do. Don't like be a good worker, do a good
Right.
job, play well, whatever you need to do that. But I'd say beyond that, know yourself, know your expectations.
What do you have anything that you'd like to promote for yourself now that you're doing?
No, I'm too old to
Or
promote.
anything that would matter to the people that follow me?
Yeah, I did look at a bit of the stuff that you kind of focus on and work with, and I'm probably way too light and nice for your crowd. uh, I have friends who do death metal. A good friend does symphonic death metal, and I find his stuff really interesting, but it's not me.
Right.
Um, so I don't know, but on the other hand, yeah, I do have records. I have a record that's all designed to be corporate song for the church, so people call it worship music. It's very, very nice, kind, gentle. You could play that stuff in any church in North America, I think.
Right.
And I have stuff that's far more raw that most of my church friends don't like. That's, I think, better expression of myself. So
Right.
I've been really fortunate to be able to do a lot of different stuff in my life, musically, career-wise, and all of that. And so, who
Right.
knows? Maybe listen to the SoundCloud stuff and tell me what you think.
Oh, I definitely will. Is it under your name?
Yeah, I could
Okay.
send you. I'll send you the link too.
Yeah, yeah. Send me a link to it so I can check it out, definitely. But
Okay.
hey, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time. Um, I always get fascinated with. I've been into music since I was a little kid. The Beatles. I see the poster back there. They were the first band I ever heard, and I've been into them, and I've always seeked out like meeting people if I can,
Hmm.
and just finding out, the backgrounds on what you guys did and what you were about and what the experience was about.